This episode is brought to you by Peloton. This year, Peloton is gifting you their best offer of the season. Get up to $300 off accessories like cycling shoes, a heart rate monitor, and more when you purchase a Peloton bike, Bike Plus, or Tread. Whether you have 10 minutes to spare for a strength class or 30 for a cycling class, there's a workout that works for you. To learn more, visit onepeloton.com. All access membership separate. Offer starts November 14th and ends November 28th. Cannot be combined with other offers. See additional terms at onepeloton.com.
Empire.
Hello and welcome to the live stream edition of the John Con Report. You can see the voice of the Commanders, Bram Weinstein there. Can answer all your questions again tonight. Talk, rehash the Commanders' 32-21 victory over the Eagles. And Bram, I always forget that 32 part because of the last second touchdown by Casey Toohill. And if you're watching, I got my chains on. You saw Taylor Heinicke on the plane. These are I don't have any real chains. I've got these chains.
I'm not cool enough to pull it off, so I'm going to let the cool guys, the quarterbacks, do the chains.
Yeah, I'm sure that's probably a better way to go. So, Bram, let's start with what last night meant, and because you and I haven't had a chance really to talk about it, we haven't had much of a chance to talk about it since the game ended. What was your biggest takeaway from that game, and what do you think this means for them going forward?
I thought it was the biggest win under Ron Rivera personally in his 2.5 years because of who they beat, because of what it meant for their season, because of who they did it against, his division game. So I kind of fall into that category. I mean, I think there's a few candidates, but I think it was the best one they've had. It was more surprising to me than the one that they had a couple of years ago against Pittsburgh, because I thought Pittsburgh was kind of heading towards the debt. Like if you watch them closely, you could see that their offense was slowing down significantly. I didn't see that in the Eagles coming in here. So I thought this was incredible. And the other part that like really, really stands out to me is, I get a chance to talk to Ron Rivera after typically a Thursday practice, this week a Friday practice because of the schedule change. And he flat out told me then we're going to run the ball a lot against them. And he was telling anybody who would listen, they'll like clue you into what they're going to do, but they don't typically just scream it from the rooftops. And he did. And then London told me he did it to him. Julie told me she did it to him. They talked to other, coaches. All of them said the same thing. And it's very rare that they just announce, here's what we're going to do, and then do it to the degree that they did it. So I was really impressed is the wrong word for this. I'm surprised. And this is the type of thing where it's like, for crying out loud, if they're capable of doing this on a consistent basis, then their record won't be 5-5 for very long.
Right. And you're right. Like I heard the run game stuff the entire time all week, and they felt very confident of that mainly because Jordan Davis was not there. And so him not being in the middle of that Eagles defense makes a big difference. And so, yeah, you're right. My question with them was, how committed are they to running the ball that way? And they could stay committed to it because they kept continuously picking up those third downs. That allowed them to stay committed to the run. If you're not doing that, the run game was good. The volume was good. But sometimes, Bram, when I look at it, my concern is how sustainable is it what they showed last night? There were a lot of times when I was watching it again today, not to pour cold water on it, because you do wonder, what does this mean, not just for last night, but what does it mean for the last 7 games or the next 7 games coming up? And can they do that consistently? And I still have some concerns or questions about that, because there are too many times where you'd see certain things aren't blocked up or the holes aren't as clean as you would like them. And what will that look like against the Giants, for example? But having said that, what I liked is the commitment to it. And there were plenty of times where 3rd down and 4, they're running the ball. The number of first and 2 or 3 yard gains on 1st down, and yet they're continuously doing it. And I thought that was to be applauded.
it's funny, like scoring's really down this year in the NFL, like kind of across the board. And I think what we're seeing is a shift back to, because people are spending so much money on corners and pass rushers. Often these guys are light, but they're extremely athletic and practically impossible to block. But if you are committed to running the ball, you have athletic offensive linemen, which I saw more athleticism out of them last night than I saw in any other game. They were motivated clearly last night. My point is, like, I think you're seeing this across the league, that teams are starting to value a run game again, because that's the counter. If you're going to spend all your resources on these extremely, hybrid type pass rushers, but they're 275, 295, you should run them over. And when Washington got good a year ago in the middle of the season, they became a power run team. And last night they announced they were going to be that. And I'm with you. Saying you're going to do it and doing it are two very different things. And they were saying it, and all weekend I'm sitting there going, yeah, but that line is, weak and banged up. Norwell was hurt coming in. Larson was hurt coming in. We now know, that they were thinking about, putting Cosme in and rotated tackles. So like they're still doing things to try to get this group together, but it was a dominant performance by them. And I don't want to take really anything away from them. I really thought it was it was really just an overall overwhelming performance, and the type of thing that if they're going to consistently do it, and that's the thing, you don't see them consistently do this.
Right.
But if they are, they're dangerous because of the way their defense can play, stop people, limit scoring, whether they get turnovers or not, they're dangerous.
Yes. And I think the other thing, and by the way, for people watching, if you're looking at why does this guy have like 20 media guy or press pass run, these are my chains. I don't have the chains like they did on the plane for Taylor Heinicke, so I'm just wearing these chains tonight. Kind of goofy, but you know what? Bram and I have had no sleep at all. The other thing I think that helped Bram last night is I thought Sam Cosme coming back, and he didn't play a ton, but he was really good against Fletcher Cox. When he was matched up against him, I think it reminds you, Cornelius Lucas has done a nice job. Sam Cosme is a better player, and he's a better run blocker. And you saw that again last night when he was in there against Fletcher Cox, gave up no ground multiple times on different sort of run schemes. And then John Bates, I think, is starting to get, now that he's getting healthier, I think is going back to being the kind of blocker he was last year. I thought he did a nice job a couple of times against Fletcher Cox as well. So that will be a help for the run game down the stretch. But again, I do have some questions about, where's Shane Prince wants to know, where's my Busch Light? I'm not in college anymore. I don't know why those guys drink Busch Light. And Brandon Sheriff was making 20, what was he? He made $33 million in 2 years, and he's drinking Busch Light.
Hey, you like what you like. At my wedding, I had Miller High Life. I like Miller High Life. That was my beer.
Yeah. We in college drank Busch beer, did not drink Busch Light. There you go. 5 chains kind. There you go. But I could not, there is no way that I'm drinking any Busch Light right now. So just
what did you make of the tackle switching? What did I couldn't figure out what was
Cosme
going on
back
there.
in. Working because Cosme just got the pad off, or the cast off on his left hand, and he didn't have full functionality with his entire hand. So they didn't want to put him out there for the full snaps, but they did want to play him, and he did make a difference. And so when he can get back in there full time, I think that will help them. What did you make? All right, so let's go to the quarterback situation right now, because Ron Rivera talked to the media today, and was asked about the whole Carson Wentz situation. Is he going to come off IR? They don't know yet. So he doesn't know what he's going to do. Well, I think he does know what he's going to do. It's just a matter of, is Carson Wentz healthy or not? And when are you going to tell everybody? But you heard his comments today. What did you think?
I listened to it twice because the first time around, I was just kind of initially, I was like, is he insinuating that Wentz would come back if he's healthy? Because that seems to be kind of against the headwinds here. And then I listened to it again, and the way he kind of phrased I want to talk to the players, and I want to get the feel of the locker room and do what's good for the team, made me feel as if that he is staying with Heinicke this weekend. I will actually be surprised if he makes that change. And I'll tell you, like, not just because they're 3-1 and they just beat the Eagles, and clearly this team is rallied, behind him. If he makes this change now, win or lose, that crowd at home against Atlanta is going to be catcalling everything Carson Wentz does.
Yes.
Because I really believe, so I think he knows this. Like, it does not mean that they won't go back to Wentz at some point. But to me, to pump the brakes on Heinicke with the heater that they're on, I just can't see him making that decision. So I don't think it will happen that way.
Well, and see, the way I took it, because the one thing he said, he's going to basically gauge the mood of the team in the locker room. And that's one thing that's an important factor. Well, if you do that, there's only one way you're going. You're going with Heinicke, because that locker is definitely behind him. And not that they're not necessarily behind Carson Wentz, but I think what they really gravitate toward Heinicke. And so if that's a factor, you're going to go there. I think the other thing you have to look at with it too is, and it's hard because it's hard to put quarterback in the same position because they're different guys. They're going to see things differently, a little bit differently, or maybe read it a little bit differently, or make a different decision. But if you get the run game going like that with Wentz back there, does it look different? Are you more explosive, or do you have, because of the threat with Heinicke's legs, does that make you better off? So I think there's a lot of factors go into it. But the other thing he said too, Bram, was the quote about basically going to treat everybody fair, and you treat everybody on the team equally, but you're also going to, when you're, and this is paraphrasing, but when you're making a decision, it's going to be what's best for the team, not the person. So to me, that sounded like a sticking with Heinicke, because while may have gone out and traded this and that for Wentz, and he's got the big contract, it's not about him, it's about the team. And so I think they will stick with Heinicke until the magic runs out.
I mean, honestly, I think a couple things can be true here, that it feels like the right thing to do is stick with Heinicke for now. And that doesn't mean that they can't decide what they're going to do next year. Wentz is under contract for 2 more years. He's a candidate to be restructured. If the concern is that he's going to kind of mentally shut down if you stick with Heinicke, listen, this guy's been through this before. Obviously, we don't really know the circumstances behind it. I know this team has been really, really, really careful about trying to prop him up, tell him how much they want him here, but it is what it is right now. And I would just say to him what Matt Ryan said to the Colts after they made a decision a couple of weeks ago that seemed preposterous at the time: stay ready. We may go back to you. Right. The season is not over. When it was 1-4, the season wasn't over. When it was 4-4, it wasn't over. When it was 4-5, it wasn't over. After a crazy win last night, everything's back on the table again, at least for like making a run. So things change fast. Stay ready, stay professional. But right now, I don't know how you could even sell me that the right thing to do is to move away from Heinicke right now. And that doesn't mean in a couple of weeks they won't. Who knows?
Right. And Juan here says, why would he go to a rusty quarterback instead of staying with the hot hand? Well, I think you're right. I think that's what he's thinking too. And it's not about, I'm sure they would tell Wentz, because I know what I hear is their belief still in him. He's still developing or growing in this offense. It's a new offense for him. So, it does take some time, but you've just won 3 out of 4, and you pull off this huge upset with Heinicke in charge and operating the way he did. We all know that things can change in very quick with this. Yeah. And it wouldn't shock me if in 3 weeks that Wentz is back in there. But listen, if they go out and beat Houston and then they beat Atlanta, you're not changing then either.
I mean, the guy who's going to be a free agent this year is Heinicke, right. Not Wentz. So, I don't know. At this point, I don't see how you move away from him. Like, we've talked about this a million times. Like, I see the limitations like everybody else, but I also see the intangibles. He did two things last night that were the most impressive two things he did last night. He had a snap go over his head. Yeah. Not only did he go back and get the ball, he had the wherewithal not to just dive on it, stepped up, ran out of the pocket, threw it out of bounds, saved them 20 yards or a turnover or something worse, made an incredible play. I mean, that is an incredible game-changing play that he made. Then at the end of the game, he knows better than to throw a dangerous pass, takes a knee to what should have just been forcing the Eagles to use a final timeout, gets hit and realizes immediately, I just goaded them, or didn't even try to. They just made a really dumb play. They had to be called, and there we go. Like, those two things, outside of they went 10 for 13 on third down, ran the ball extraordinarily well. I thought Scott Turner's, owed big bouquet of flowers for the game plan he went through last night. Look, this is not an indictment of, I still think both these things can be true at the same time. Just because Heinicke is the guy right now doesn't mean Wentz might not be the guy in the future. And I think they need to look at it that way. But to sit here and make a quarterback change right now feels preposterous. Now, the one thing that worries me, like when Rivera does say, I'm going to talk to the players about it, and I think they should voice their opinions when they pick him, is that going to bother Wentz? Like, I hope not,
This episode is brought to you by Carvana. A date night, falling down an internet rabbit hole, that hobby you can't tell the neighbors about. Your time's valuable, and Carvana knows it. With Carvana, you can get an offer, sell your car, and get it gone 100% online. You shouldn't have to choose between time and money, so don't. Availability may vary by market. To get started, visit Carvana.com or download the app.
Close your eyes. It's time to discover what starting and growing your own business feels like. Whether your business is bedsheets or skincare, Shopify's with you every step of the way. Now, open your eyes. This is Possibility, powered by Shopify. Sign up for a free trial at shopify.com/offer22. Shopify.com/offer22.
I think it's as much, not so much picking their brains, it's just like, hey, his point was, I'm not going to tell you guys, the media, before I tell my team. So that was the other thing on that snap over his head, Bram, that was a touchdown drive. He saved a touchdown drive. So like that was a huge, and I even joked last night, I said, is it possible that two of your best plays involved an incompletion and getting drilled on a kneel down? And they were, because they, so, but he also, like, I felt like he made some good decisions, and they had a couple throws to Samuel that were really good, Terry, that were really good. So, and the funny thing is, and this is what I have to go back and still watch, because I was only able to it was hard today to get through today we had multiple stories I had to write, Zoom call with Rivera. So I haven't been a chance to watch all like the past game. But they had some open guys last night. And I think that was a direct result of the ability to run the ball. And someone asked, Casey Chapman did ask, did this line really play better? Well, I think I think where they were helped was they were in the first game against the Eagles, there were 12 plays they had that gained negative yards. They had 12 plays for minus 73 yards. Last night they had, and Rivera put the stat out there, said this stat, and I'm going to trust him for now because I haven't added it up. But he said of those 49 runs they had, 1 lost yards. Now, I'm going to exclude like the kneel downs as lost yards, but that's how you can help the line. And that's why when I did my keys and prediction for the game that on the podcast, the number one thing was run the ball. You've got to run the ball, because if you run the ball well, it's going to help the protection. It's going to put them in a better spot. And they were in better spots all game because of their ability to stick with the run. Not just, it wasn't, again, I'm going to stress, it wasn't like they ran the ball great. It was they ran the ball with determination and again, the knowing that this is how you have to win. So stick with it. Yeah, that's what it was as much as anything. And I also there were a lot of times I liked the action of the run game, and there were a number of times where you saw guys getting out of their gaps because of the motion and the action of the play, a lot of motion. And then you'd have a Curtis Samuel going one way in motion, Logan Thomas. Shout out Logan if you're listening. Logan Thomas running a sit block the other way, coming back, and it just crossing gaps up. And I felt like they did a good job with that. So I like
the tight ends overall were outstanding.
I agree.
Night. This was the most physical that the offensive front played of the year by far. They were motivated. Logan Thomas was extremely physical last night. Like looked like the type of blocker, let alone receiver, that we were accustomed to before the knee injury a year ago. They were really motivated last night. Like I'd like to hear more from them about what it was that really got them motivated that way, because they were ready to go. And I'll go back to, it is rare the coaches tell you exactly what they're going to do. And the coaches did this over and over and over. And they literally did not care that Philadelphia knew that, and they ran it down their throat anyway. It was a dominant performance. And, I think it's something to be proud of. I agree with Rivera, though. They are 5-5. So this idea that we arrived is a little much. So I agree with that, talking point. And last thing really on Heinicke, and Rivera does this sometimes, and it's a mild complaint of his communication with the media. But I was not entirely clear when he said, I'm going to make a decision, whether he meant for the season or for the game. And then he said, I don't want somebody looking over their shoulder, but it's a week. So I was not exactly clear, no matter what he does here this week, which I think will be Heinicke. Is he mean for the rest of the year? I didn't know what he was talking about.
No, and I think he even said that because at first he said, I don't want them looking over their shoulder. Well, is it for the rest of the year? No. Well, guess what? You're going to be looking over your shoulder if that's the case. But I do think and he then said it's a one game at a time right now. So I think that's why I say, I think if that's the case, then you're going to stick with Heinicke. And then if he has if he goes out and struggles against Houston and they lose, well, then I think you're going to rethink some things. But here, going to that point though, Bram, and this is one of the things that Rivera talks about today as well. And that locker room was unlike most locker rooms you're going to see after a regular season win. Yeah. But it was funny because there was a distinct difference. There were some of the older guys, the offensive linemen and the tight ends were on one side of the room. They're reacting as if they had a good regular season win. The other side of the room, it felt like they had they clinched a playoff spot. That's how they were reacting. And it was fun to watch because if any group of players deserves to have a night where they can unleash emotions like that, it's this one after all the stuff that goes on here. But the one thing Rivera has stressed, and I think you're going to, he keeps talking about Houston's run game. He keeps talking about how that Houston is going to be well coached and that they haven't arrived yet. And he's right, because if you go out there, if you don't build on this win, then what did you accomplish? You have to build on this. The only way you're going to build on this is you have to go down to Houston and win that game. And so his message basically, Bram, was act like you've been, now that you've done this, now you got to act like you've been there before.
2 years in a row, they've had wins like this. I mean, they beat Pittsburgh when they were undefeated pretty late in the season. And then the year later, they played Tampa Bay and they beat them in what felt like a huge statement game. And they ended up 7-10. So, to his point, I'll hear him on this. They haven't arrived yet, but I don't have a problem with them celebrating. I thought that game was bonkers. That was just old school. Doc Walker used to always use. They took their manhood from him. That's his big line. They took their manhood from him. It was just startling how dominant they were up front. That first half was incredible, and the right team won last night. You parse out the calls if you want. The right team won last night. There were a couple of calls I will hear out Philadelphia on. There was one against Benjamin St. Juste in the first half that I thought was utterly ridiculous. The PI call I thought was terrible. But I will hear them on Dallas Goedert should have face mask and not a fumble. So I'll hear them on that. That was a bad call. All the other ones, none of it was ticky-tack or anything. I think the right calls were made. So they deserve the win, but you could just see the margin for error. Just go look at time of possession, plays run, yardage totals in the first half, and they were up one score barely and needed a 58-yard field goal to not only be up by 3. So we are it's still the margin for error for them is very, very, very thin. One thing on the Eagles, I just want to mention this before we run out of time. I got to tell you, Dallas Goedert got hurt. He's going to miss time. Jason Kelsey was hurt last night. It was obvious he got hurt. I don't know how bad, but he was.
Yeah.
And A.J. Brown got hurt and was struggling, and they didn't throw the ball to him very much because I don't think he could run very well. If all three of those guys are messed up, and one of them is going to be for, at least 4 games now, there's going to be a course correction on them because their offense will not function with those 3 guys being marginalized. It does not mean I think the division is opened up. I think we're just too far in to the point of, can you do this consistently? If this team was 7-3, I'd go, watch out. They got a shot to catch those guys now. But because they're not, I don't think the margin for error is there. But Philadelphia, it's going to be an interesting few weeks for them. Watch when they don't score a lot of points. You watch.
Oh, yeah, because their whole game is playing from ahead. By the way, I put this up there. Shane Prince said, does Rivera really need to ask the team about the quarterback decision? He's not asking the team. He's going to tell the team. But he would take into – but where as a coach, what your job is to do is what's the mood of the locker room. You have to have your pulse on the locker room. That's what it is. But he's not going to walk around saying, hey, who do you think it should be? Who do you think it should be? It's like, no, he's going to see how do they react to this guy? How do they react to this guy, et cetera. That's what you do. Just that's always, but he's not going to go pull guys or do anything like that. So just to clear that up. But yeah, Bram, I lost my, but the Eagles, but it's funny because like this NFC is still wide open and this team is going to have a chance. I felt like last night was could very well change. That's a trajectory changing win if you let it, because but again, you have to win in Houston for that game to really mean something. Otherwise, then it would be just the same as if you had lost to Philly and go down and beat Houston. It's got to mean something. And the only way it can mean something is if you go out and you have to win the next 2. And then you have the Giants in 2 games and see what happens there. But they've got a shot, but the question will be, can they play consistently enough? And that's where I'm going to gauge the run game and see, can they do that? I'm not convinced yet. But again, I think I go back to Jahan Dotson being out there is a big help. Bates being healthy is a big help in the run game. Cosme coming back when he does will be a good help in the run game. I'm still not sure with the guards how they're going to hold up as far as getting to the second level and helping, but we'll see. So defensively, what'd you think?
I thought the Eagles got away from up-tempo, and that was working for them. A couple of their people had told me before the game that they were going to do that because they are very respectful, especially of the interior D-line, and they wanted to try to tire them out and maybe force rotations not in the way that Washington would intend, and it worked for them early. And I was surprised in the second half they kind of got away from that, especially down, that they didn't get more into that up-tempo game. It was working for them. Benjamin St. Juste again, I thought was very good. I thought he got jobbed on that call on the PI down the field. I thought he was very good. Obviously made an incredible play, to turn what would have been a big play into a turnover. That was a great play. Allen and Payne remain 2 of the best in the business and maybe the best tandem in the NFL this year at D tackle. And that's a really tough interior O-line that they dealt with yesterday. Sweat made the play when they needed it. They're still missing their leading tackler, and they're thin at linebacker. He's not playing. This is 3 weeks in a row, 2 weeks in a row that they've played real offenses, and it hasn't really mattered. So, I think they deserve a lot of credit. I mean, they're playing extraordinarily well. I don't think you can ask much more of them really right now.
No, I think you're right. And I do, they're also giving some tough assignments to Benjamin St. Juste, and he's going to give up some stuff. Corner play is always going to be inconsistent because in this league, if you're guarding somebody man-to-man, they're going to come at you by and large. So, but I think they're doing a nice job there. I like what Cam Curl adds. I think he's playing very, very well. But last night going into the game, before I get to that, Justin Check wants to know any word on the Holcomb injury. Think he plays this week? I don't know because we haven't even, to be honest, I haven't even seen him on the practice field in a few weeks since he got hurt. So until we see him out on the field, I'm not going to guess. And his name, he did not come up today. We only had Rivera for about 10 minutes or so he didn't come up today. We'll get a better idea on that on Wednesday. So there you go. But I like where the defense has been heading. And I like, with Chase Young, we haven't even talked about him coming back. I think it will be this week. We still got to get through the week and see.
I think it will be too.
Yeah.
He
What
was,
do you think
he was
he'll add?
warming up yesterday, which is always a surefire sign that it's right
Right.
around the corner. Jahan Dotson warmed up last week, so I felt comfortable that
Right.
barring a setback, he would play. Chase Young was warming up last night at the link, which said to me, they're ready. They're going to ramp him up. I just, I want to lower the expectations there. He's going to be on a snap count. I don't think he's going to play a ton, but I think his presence will matter for sure.
I think his energy matters too. I think you saw that. It's funny because one of the guys who was the most jubilant in the locker room after the game was Chase Young. I mean, he was the one dancing and singing and everything. So that's what he brings, is that energy. I would temper it too, though, because it's just asking a lot for a guy to come in after missing that much time off that injury and come back and be a highly productive player right away. I think the good thing for them is that James Smith-Williams and Casey Tootle have done a nice job as ends in this league alongside Montez Sweat. So that reduces some of the pressure on him. The key for Young will be that group has played well together. He's got to go in there and fit into what they do and what they're doing and what they're doing well. It can't be going out there and just trying to put up numbers. I hope he has watched and seen that this is what's working well with this group. Fit in within that, and you're going to make some plays. I would guarantee it. So, I think assuming he does come back, which again, it's certainly trending that way.
One other name that's under the radar but has been a big deal here is John Ridgeway. I mean,
yes,
by letting Tim Settle go, and then having the unfortunate, early season injury with Fedarian Mathis, and Daniel Wise ended up with like high ankle sprain or something like that. Like, they were extraordinarily thin. Like they put themselves in my opinion, into a unnecessary thin position with these two great starters, but who was behind them, and they rotate a lot of people. And they picked this guy up. He's just a 5th round pick. And I mean, I got to tell you, as a rotational piece, he's been an integral part of all this stuff, that they can trust this guy, put him in there and not see a humongous drop off from those other two. It's really, boy, that's a hit, because I mean, I get it. They liked him coming out of the draft and all that stuff. They can say this. He was a 5th round pick. I mean, it's not like the Cowboys gave up on some 1st round pick. And I think it's a big deal, like, that he's come in here because they needed somebody once Mathis got hurt badly, and he's turned out to be very, very good for them.
I agree, and I think you saw that even in the Houston game, in the Indianapolis game, you saw that a couple times where he controlled the center Ryan Kelly and just stood him up and just found the ball and gets off and makes a play. And so I think the more comfortable he gets in this system and their technique, the way they want him to play, the more effective he's going to be, because he gives them something they don't have. And you go back to the Mathis stuff, that it's all about a guy who can play over the nose. That's what Ridgeway gives you. And, he had the penalty last week. That was on special teams. I don't think they agreed with that penalty, but it happened. But it does not mean, like, it's funny because I saw some stuff like after the game on Twitter, cut him. Like, are you kidding me? Like, this is a guy that's going to be hard to find. He's going to be a productive player for them. And why? That's when people go overboard. That was like 1% or 2% of the base, I guess I would say. But he's a very productive player, good pickup. And I think when you combine him with Mathis next year, you go back, and if they can keep Daron Payne, you go back to having a really nice tackle rotation.
Yep.
So
I agree.
Yeah. So any last thoughts, Bram?
I'm also with Rivera on, listen, this is the NFL. It's a professional team they're playing. I know they played 2 teams with great records the last couple of weeks, and they're playing the team with the worst record, but they were on the road Monday night, emotional win. They got a short week. They're not going to practice very much, certainly not very much in pads. They got to turn around and fly and go on the road. Don't take this for granted, because that game against Philadelphia is going to mean nothing if they go down there and lose.
Right.
They got to win this game.
Yeah, no, this is a must-win game. And I think, I'm not sure who, I don't know if it was Raymond on here said it too on the comment section over here, but the Houston game is one that they're going to find out what kind of team is this. Now, I kind of think you find that out every week. However, I understand completely what he's saying, and that's because this is a game that tests who you are as well. Are you going to get fat and happy after that win? And I think that's one of the things that Rivera is going to guard against in a 1,000 ways this week. And you haven't done anything. You're 5-5.
5-5.
5-5. That's it.
You know, even if he's, I'm sure he's ecstatic. And I saw the clip of him in the locker room, and I was moved by it too. You know, with him, what it meant to him for his team to do that. You know, amid his mother passing, and but the same way, like, what's he going to crow about? He has an under 500 record as a coach here, so so I hear him on that, and I'm with him on all that. Like, they haven't gotten there. It's on the table for them again, like it was last year. Hopefully nothing, I think some things that were out of their hands got in their way last year, the COVID outbreak on this team. So I'm hoping that nothing crazy happens to them, this fall in any way that kind of takes opportunity off the table, assuming that it doesn't, and we're not in the similar situation that we were a year ago. I'm ready to see what they can do in December. And they've done it again. It's 3 years in a row that they've turned their season around. The hole they get themselves into puts them in a position, unfortunately, this year where the division is pie in the sky, but it doesn't mean they can't make the playoffs. And it doesn't mean that Philadelphia ain't going to be scared if this team shows up and is near them, because they saw what they can do to them. So if they can do that to the team that I think, at least through the halfway point of the season, has been the best team in the NFC, then a lot of things are on the table for them if they can have the consistency that Rivera's talking about, for sure.
And here's the other thing, last thing for me too. You want that home field advantage back, go down and beat Houston. Be impressive in that win. And then just think how that game is going to be when they come back to play against Atlanta at home. It's, the crowds have been better this year as far as the enthusiasm or whatever. The atmosphere has been better, right? So if you go down there, if you come back from Houston 6-5 and it's an impressive win, and I would say this, you win in the NFL, it's impressive because there's so many close games every week. So just win. A road game is a good win. I don't care if it's 17-16, it's a good win on the road.
Short week in Philadelphia, physical game. You're not going to practice very much. Turn around and fly to Texas. I don't care what the score is. If they win, it's an enormous win. And next week, it's Thanksgiving weekend, which means a ton of people are home. Atlanta's not going to travel 1 million Falcons fans up here like some of these other teams are going to be. I expect FedEx Field to be extremely partial for the first time in a while and get behind this team. And if they're 7-5, it's on, right? It's really on. So hopefully they'll get the next two.
Bram, we're going to cut it there. And I appreciate everybody tuning in. Thanks to Bram for joining me. Couple programming notes. I am going to put out a podcast on Thursday, probably talking about some of the quarterback stuff. But also, if you read my story on Terry McLaurin on ESPN.com the other day that came out Monday, if you haven't read it, go back and read it. But I'm going to play the interview for that on the podcast. So tune in for that, but I'll have about 10 minutes or so on other stuff, but also play that 10-minute interview with Terry. I think you'll really get something out of that. So that will be out on Thursday, keys and predictions on Friday. And as always, thank you for tuning in. By the way, send some more questions. If you want to send some questions for me on Twitter, hit me up at John_Kime, and I'll answer maybe one or two of those on Thursday as well. Anyway, Bram, thanks for joining me. And as always, everybody else, thanks for tuning in. We'll talk to you next time.